W naszej kulturze istnieje wiele przekonań na temat tego, co powinno, a czego nie powinno się w stosunku do naszych rodziców, a także w jaki sposób powinniśmy odnosić się do naszego domu i rodziny pochodzenia. No więc w dzisiejszej rozmowie porozmawiam o wychowanych przez niedojrzałych emocjonalnie rodziców. I nie sugeruję, że wszyscy rodzice są niedojrzali emocjonalnie, ale jak dziś pamiętam taki moment, w którym nagle okazało się, że moi rodzice jednak nie wiedzą wszystkiego i że sama czułam się wówczas bardzo zagubiona, zwłaszcza zdając sobie sprawę z tego, że oni także popełniają błędy i mają wiele bardzo ludzkich, ale często emocjonalnych, mylnych, oceniających i osądzających stron. Niedojrzali emocjonalnie rodzice nie biorą się znikąd. Oni zazwyczaj też zostali wychowani przez niedojrzałych emocjonalnie rodziców, w tym wypadku naszych dziadków. No więc jak zatrzymać ten transakcyjny przekaz niedojrzałości emocjonalnej? Tak, on ma szansę zatrzymać się właśnie na nas, na tym pokoleniu i nie iść w kolejne. Proszę Państwa, moim i Waszym gościem jest dr Lindsay Gibson, autorka książki Wychowani przez niedojrzałych emocjonalnie rodziców. Jak odzyskać wiarę w siebie i żyć życiem, którego pragniesz. Ta książka zadaje takie pytania, ale również podaje na nie propozycje odpowiedzi. Czy ciągle szukasz aprobaty swoich działań u innych? Czy skupiasz się na zaspokajaniu cudzych potrzeb kosztem własnych? Czy uważasz, że tylko poświęcenie jest dowodem miłości? Czy dbanie o siebie uważasz za oznakę egoizmu? No więc kto już nadstawia uszy i myśli, że ta rozmowa może być dedykowana właśnie jemu? Dodam jeszcze, że ta rozmowa realizowana jest w języku angielskim, a tłumaczenie znajdziecie na mojej stronie www.joannagutral.pl. Patronat nad dzisiejszym odcinkiem przejęło gdańskie wydawnictwo psychologiczne, polski wydawca książki Wychowani przez niedojrzałych emocjonalnie rodziców. Jak odzyskać wiarę w siebie i żyć życiem, którego pragniesz. Napisałam blurba do amerykańskiej i polskiej wersji tej książki, zatem serdecznie, gorąco i z pełną odpowiedzialnością właśnie Wam ją polecam. Tymczasem zapraszam do wysłuchania kolejnego odcinka podcastu Gutral Gada. Gutral to ja, nazywam się Joanna Gutral, jestem psycholożką i psychoterapeutką, a to jest mój podcast, w którym rozmawiamy na temat psychologii, zdrowia psychicznego, psychoterapii i psychoedukacji. Zapraszam. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lindsay Gibson is with us here. Hi, it's so good to see you. I'm so excited.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Always. I wish we would meet in person, but online is still great. And I know that you are extremely busy because you're working on another books. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Okay, we can't wait to have them in Poland. But for now, let's talk about the book Self-Care for Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents that was recently published in Polish by Gdańskie Wydawnictwo Psychologiczne. And I would say that the concept of emotionally immature parents was introduced to the Polish audience by your previous work, of course, but people are often asking, what's the difference between each of the books? If I read Emotionally Immature, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, one of the first book that was published over here in Polish, would it be the same as reading Self-Care for Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents? What are the differences between each of the books, and should we read it in some sort of special order that you recommend?
Well, I like to sample things. I like to jump in and see what catches my attention that day. So I'm all in favor of people buying whatever book calls to them. I think you really come across some good things when you just let your intuition guide you. But I can tell you how I conceptualize the books, and maybe that will help your listeners think about it. The first book was laying out the concept of what emotional immaturity is and how it's not only possible, but actually fairly frequent that older people show signs of emotional immaturity. And this is something that I don't think had been so well recognized in sort of the popular culture until my book came out. There certainly have been other books that have been talking about this phenomenon, but I'm not sure that they had been so specifically identified as emotionally immature. So for the first book, that was introducing the concept of emotional immaturity and how it's possible for parents, grandparents, adults to be emotionally immature, and then what that causes in their children, and unfortunately what continues on into adulthood. So hence the title, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. So that book is probably the best for an introduction and for an overview. It's certainly probably the best known of the books that I've written. It has something like 15,000 reviews on Amazon. It's really made the rounds. And then after that, the second book is Recovering from Emotionally Immature Parents. And that was in response to how many people said, tell me more. How do I cope with these people? Yes, now I understand what's going on and I understand how I feel, but tell me what to do with them because they're driving me crazy. So the second book is really how to handle and at times resist their behaviors that can be so difficult to put up with and difficult to know how to respond to. So then the third book, The Self-Care for Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, was really for fun.
Wow. Guys, if you need some fun and you want to think about your emotionally immature parents, this is the book for you.
Yeah, it's a compilation of little short chapters, which I like. To me, it's kind of like eating popcorn. They're small, they're short, they're crunchy, and they just address different topics. And they're written in a way to be entertaining. This is not primarily, certainly is not a textbook kind of book. It's written that you could sit down and read a chapter or two before going to bed, or you could read it waiting for the doctor. And there are just many different little topics that I address. And they have a lot of these articles have been published before in a women's magazine locally, and they were quite popular there. So it's easier, more fun, really kind of little bits of insight to snack on.
All right. Well, so I have two things to comment on that. First of all, I remember the moment where I realized that my parents don't know everything and they are not the superheroes. And I believe that a lot of us have this feeling, especially when we are young, that, our parents know best. And whenever there is some conflict or there is some problem, they're always right. And all of a sudden you start growing up and realize like, oh my God, it's not true. And then you start realizing that your autonomy, your knowledge, your experience is also valid, might be important, and sometimes might be bigger or better in some fields than your parents. And it kind of ruined the picture of your parent as a hero. Doesn't matter if he was mature or immature. We would like to perceive our parents as a hero. Why is so? What do you think? And what happens to a person when he is losing this vision as his mother, father, grandparent, as a superhero of your life that can always guide you and lead you?
That's such a beautiful way of putting it, losing the vision. Yeah. Because to little children, you can imagine you're growing up in a home with giants who can do everything. I mean, they can open doors, they can They can cook meals. They can drive the car. They're so smart. They know the answer to everything. They're so powerful. We forget what it's like to be 3 feet tall, you know? So they really are superheroes. They can do so many things. They're so smart. They can do so many things that we have no idea how to go about doing. So, you know, we kind of worship them. And that is a good thing, because little children, like preschool age, they live in what one psychologist called the magic years. And that's also, it's a time of superheroes and magic. It's also the time for monsters under the bed and other imaginative things. But everything to them is meaningful and alive. Okay. And the world is filled with magic. And parents have the biggest magic of all with their competencies. So it gives the child a feeling of protection to feel that they have or could have magic powers and they have magic parents. As time goes on, though, around the age of 7, the child begins to develop this sense of self-consciousness. It's like that's when we develop that little witness inside us that is looking out and feels like it's in the body. It's not the body. It feels like there's a consciousness inside the body. And that part of us that starts to develop into a sense of self is really very, very able to notice a lot of things and to have some logic, like when things don't fit together, or when a parent says one thing and does something else, or a parent lies, or a parent becomes violent. The child begins to think about this as something that doesn't fit or something that isn't right. They just have their own separate consciousness at that point. So that's usually when the vision begins to be affected with your parents. But then, of course, as you get older, and especially when you're going through adolescence, you really can take a look at your parents as people now. And suddenly they're not these magical demigods. You can really see them for what they are. And you may be confused about that, but it isn't like you don't notice it anymore. You do notice it. And that becomes very confusing for a lot of people because they know that they're supposed to, quote, respect their parents, and they know that they're supposed to kind of be in awe of their parents. That's the way these parents like it. And they know they're supposed to be under the control of these parents. But if they begin to resist that or have another opinion about that, and the parent doesn't listen, and the parent comes back and they get more controlling or they get more critical, that child is really confused and has to work out what is happening. And I think that's what I have hoped to do in the books, is to help explain what's going on when you begin to see behind the curtain of, or the emperor's clothes, or however you want to think about it, when you begin to see behind that to some of the limitations of your parents and what that's about. And I think that helps to really clear up what's going on so that the person doesn't feel as badly confused or let down. But it is, it can be very sad for people when they begin to see their parents as flawed human beings, particularly if they're emotionally immature, because really you don't want your parent to be less mature than you. You want them to remain in that demigod status secretly, deep down.
Of course you want. It gives you the feel of being safe and being protected and have someone who knows better than you and can, help you with all your doubts. But you also use the word immature. And sometimes when we lose that view as our parents, the biggest wizards of all time that can, protect us against everything, we can see some mistakes that have been made. We name them, we call them out, and we suffer with some sort of grief after those mistakes happened. And very often, from perceiving our parents as the best people ever, we start evaluating them as they made so many mistakes and they caused so much mess in my life, that we start regretting, or we start feeling like we were lied to. And when you said that the articles you wrote and that are part of the book were very popular, it recalled me a lot of posts and quotes on social media, kind of accusing the parents for causing a lot of harm. And I'm just wondering, first of all, are we able to recover from this sort of grief? And the second thing, if we were raised by emotionally immature parents, does it mean there is no hope for us?
Well, I think you know my answer on that.
I do, but I want to hear it out loud so other people will know as well.
Oh, no, it's, no, we can certainly recover from it. In fact, no, there's tremendous amount of hope. I mean, as long as you have empathy for yourself, and as long as you have the capacity to self-reflect, and to look at other people with insight and compassion, you can change. You can change a lot of these dynamics that have gotten internalized from growing up with parents like this. You change it by knowing what it is and beginning to take it from the level of automatic reactivity up to the level of conscious response. Okay? And that process, through psychoeducation, through therapy, through reading, that response can be just bumped up to really effective ways of protecting yourself, interacting with emotionally immature people, finding solutions to old kinds of relationship problems. And all that is done through your education and your consciousness. It's been interesting that so many people have said to me about the books that just knowing what it was and why it was there and what made them act that way was so helpful, because in the absence of that, you blame yourself. And then your self-esteem gets affected and your sense of efficacy gets undermined. So when you understand that this other person may have some problems with their maturity, all of a sudden it shifts that paradigm that they're right, I'm wrong, there's something the matter with me. That's often at the basis of a lot of the problems of people who have parents like this. They have that secret belief that maybe they're not a good, loving person. So yeah, the hope is certainly there, because I've seen what a difference it makes to people. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is that when you come from a background like that, and you learn about these things and you transform your understanding of the situation, and then you kind of go back into the relationship with this different kind of awareness and these different skills, you have become a much more mature and complex person yourself that you would not have had, in a way, if you had easier parents. So I say in the ending to, I think it's the first book, I said, is it worth it to have a chance for 2 lifetimes to have grown up with these issues, if, when you understand what's going on, you get to create yet another life for yourself? And I think that's a tremendous advantage to having people or having parents like this.
There is this very thin line, and it's been especially exposed around Christmas time. I don't know how about in the US, but in Poland especially, when there is a coming back for Christmas time, and people are facing the dilemma about, should I go back and meet with my parents, because that's what the tradition says, that you should spend Christmas time with your family, or should I put myself first and spend the Christmas as I want? But then the consequences of that will be my parents being disappointed or arguing with me, or, some unpleasant situations. And this is the very often question asked: what should I do? Should I try to keep contact with the parents that I know have been immature, that hurt me in some ways, even if not on purpose? Or should I put myself first, cut off the strings that I am still attached with my family, and just live my life by itself? And I know this is not yes or no question. I'm just trying to figure out how can I lead this internal dialogue to came up with some sort of solutions.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that is a primary goal in the kind of psychotherapy that I do with people who have these issues is beginning to know what it is that they feel and need and want. Because when you grow up with parents like this, you're really kind of encouraged to tamp down your awareness of your feelings and needs, because everything tends to revolve around the parents. So it's often very hard for them to get in touch with how they feel. When they get into conflict internally about should I go home or not, I always feel very excited, because that means that there's enough of their self-awareness now that they're saying, I realize I don't want to go home. And yet there's going to be a price if I don't make my parents happy and go home. So when that happens, that conflict that you're describing, it tells me that person's sense of self has gotten much, much stronger. Now they can consider whether or not they want to go home. Before, it might be, they might, fight with their spouse, or, have a terrible couple of weeks with their kids, or be in a rotten mood, or get depressed, but it would never occur to them that they didn't want to go home. So it's a mark of progress when you're at this point of conflict. So then what I encourage people to do is to really think out how they feel about this. And whether or not this year, people get into this thing where they think, oh, I'm making this decision for the rest of my life, but you're really not. You're making the decision about this year at Christmas, whether to go home or not. And when you make your decision, you have the opportunity to really tune into yourself to see if it's going to be a hardship on you or your family to go home to your parents. And sometimes it's such a hardship that I will say to someone, do you realize that you don't have to go? And they'll say, oh, no, I have to go. I have to go because my mother would be so upset, or my father would be so mad. But just to get them to entertain the possibility that they wouldn't go, for me, that's tremendous progress right there. They may still decide to go. They may still be too afraid not to go. But at least they have allowed themselves the mental freedom of realizing that, I'm going, but I really don't want to. That's personal growth. So there are times, though, when I've worked with people who are truly letting me know that contact with their parents is bad for them. They come back from visits and they're sick for a week, or they come back and they're exhausted, or they're having panic attacks before they go. And then you really have to talk about whether or not they might need to take a break from their parents. I never phrase it as, well, maybe you need to break things off with your parents. But I have asked them how they would feel about taking a little break. Or having it so that there's an optimal kind of distance, like you go, but you stay in a hotel instead of in their home, or you go, but you only stay for a couple of days. You know, there are things that a lot of people never think about because they've always gone home for 2 weeks at Christmas. So when you're trying to increase the person's sense of autonomy and their right to make a decision about how they want to spend their holiday, because, yeah, I mean, it's not like you owe that to someone. It's not written down anywhere that you have to. It's just that people are very afraid of changing these roles.
But in the same time, in the same time, when we are not saying what are the changes about to happen, then no one is aware, and it might cause even more bigger consequences. I remember that I was afraid of telling my parents for about a month that I'm not coming home for Christmas the first time, because I was supposed to go to the beautiful state of Virginia. And finally, I told them that this year I'm spending Christmas in US. And they were like, oh, yeah, that's what we assumed. And I was scared for a month of telling them, because I was so worried that they're going to be hurt because my family is small and there's going to be some changes and I don't know if they are ready. And they were kind of happy that I am gone, because they were like, oh, we're not going to cook so much, we're going to have some chill out time. I was like, oh, great. I mean, I wish I wouldn't wait for a month to telling you guys. But I know that sometimes when you realize that there were things in your childhood that were not okay on your parents' end, and you still carry some consequences of that in form of beliefs or experiences that hurts you, there is this need of making a decision. Am I quitting contacting them, or are we, having this relationship going on? So I believe that facing this kind of dilemma is very difficult for a person who is struggling with that. Is there any chance to accept what happened in the past and try to navigate this relationship towards more healthy patterns? Is a child able to somehow show and inspire your parent to get this maturity in a relationship with your kid?
That's what a lot of people want to do. They have a secret hope that if they could find the right way to communicate or set limits or set boundaries with their parents, that their parents would learn to become more emotionally mature and they would change. That's the hope. And it's often very difficult to get at those, I call them healing fantasies. It's the secret belief that one day you'll be able to have the kind of relationship with your parents where you'll feel respected and you'll feel like you can be yourself with them, and you'll feel like you could, politely and sensitively tell them you weren't coming home for Christmas and not worry about it for a month. But that healing fantasy often prevents us from seeing what they really can and can't give us. And it prevents us from maybe looking for that someplace else too, because we can stay very attached to our family. So, of course, we all hope that the parent is going to change and grow along with us. But if they can't, that doesn't mean that you can't continue to grow and learn more about yourself and learn more about the kind of relationships that you want to have with people, which may be very different from the kind of relationship than you can have with your parents. So yes, it can be done. There's a lot of hope and a lot of fantasy going on, but some of that has to be dealt with in terms of what the realities are with the parents.
Okay, so let's imagine reality is like that. I diagnosed my parents as a emotionally immature parent. I am trying to make some sort of change to keep being in a relationship with them, but they are not giving equal amount of work, which means that they are not trying to change. They like the old rules. They're doing everything to keep them that way. I feel bad. And I am also scared of losing them. And I don't want to, stop talking to them or not see them ever again. What are the options for self-care for myself in this situation? Because for a lot of people, it looks like I'm blocked. I cannot move. I got stuck. So what can I do for myself then?
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean about thinking about what would make the visit or the contact easier for you, or not exhaust you or frustrate you. Lots of times people have to think of what they will do to give themselves a break being around them so they don't get so triggered and reactive to them. As long as you can stay in a place where you're aware of what they're doing and aware of what you're feeling inside, you have the choice of doing things that move the interaction toward what you want. Like, and I also say, go for the interaction, not improving the whole relationship. Just try to make this interaction a success about whatever the topic is. And forget about the part about we're going to make this relationship better, and just concentrate on what's going on right this moment. It's hard to do because they can be, the emotionally mature parent can be very slippery. They can project a lot of blame. They can be very emotionally reactive, which is hard to handle. But you have to keep in mind that it's up to you to take care of yourself and to emotionally protect yourself by either keeping distance or setting boundaries, setting limits, stopping a conversation when you've had enough or when it's beginning to get disrespectful. And there are many things that you can do in the relationship where you are taking charge of your own response. So you're observing what they're doing, but then you're consciously aware of how you're going to respond to them, and you're aware of what the outcome is that you want. You don't just wander in and hope for the best. You think about, this is the outcome I want from this interaction. And that's what you keep your eye on, because emotionally immature people go all over the place, reacting to their own thoughts and what you said, and it gets very confusing. So you can structure the situation yourself, and you can keep yourself in an observant state of mind so that your responses are good for you, not just trying to please them.
The immaturity of your parent doesn't need to stop your maturation process.
Oh, no. Oh, no. And if it does, you probably are going to develop symptoms, because like anxiety, depression, that kind of thing, because we really do have I believe, an innate growth drive, a maturational drive within us. And when somebody tries to keep us in a certain state, so that they can have that pleasure of that old role that we used to play, it doesn't work. It's like the river has flowed on. It just doesn't, you can't go backwards like that.
The full title of your book is Self-Care for Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Honor your emotions, nurture yourself, and live with a confidence. Sounds like a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you give us a little bit of tips for someone who did not read the book yet? What sort of advices or things to try out we can get from the book?
Yeah, I'll just look at the The book is presented in different sections. For instance, there's a section on protecting and caring for yourself, dealing with people, and then coping with challenges. And within that, there are different things, but I'll just read the first section. Underneath that, there's be true to yourself, how to build a better relationship with yourself. You have the right to be here, listening to your soul. Practice emotional self-protection, healing from emotional injuries, and honoring your inner world. That's a very important one because emotionally immature people do not honor other people's inner world, their subjective experience. They think that people should be like them, and they're not curious about what people are really like inside, what they're experiencing. So honoring your inner world is absolutely essential for the development and maturation of yourself. And then nurturing your emotional health and the importance of emotional safety and other things. I won't keep going on, but it's really putting yourself at the center of your world. And that's not an egotistical way of being. It is a self-knowledgeable, aware state of being. People who have good self-knowledge are usually pretty nice and considerate of other people, right? Because they understand what they feel like and they have good empathy and they can imagine other people's states of mind if they're familiar with their own. Now, emotionally immature people, because they kind of disregard the inner psychological world and they think it's a bunch of navel gazing or something like that, they really don't imagine what it's like for other people inside. And so it can make them oblivious to how they treat people and what they say to people. And of course, that's, not good at all for relationships.
So basically, by developing your own inner world and getting to know how it works and how do I feel, and kind of give yourself a space that maybe was not there when you were in a close contact with an emotionally immature parent, you can develop coping skills that will not only help you to grow, but also to deal with the emotional immature parent.
Yes, and one of the most basic ones is their assumption, the emotionally immature person's assumption, that they are the most important person in the room. They're the most important person in the relationship. That's a big one for people to think over and maybe reconsider. Is it true that their wishes and their needs are more important than yours? Or does it just seem that way because the emotionally immature person keeps telling you that in one way or another? So, yeah, getting out from under these assumptions and these role assumptions is very important for your own growth. And, as a clinical psychologist, I get to have a front row seat to see what happens when people don't get to develop themselves. And it's really tragic because they're so full of self-doubt and fear and shame. It's, a lot of people are really crippled by that inability to become themselves.
Thank you for your books. And we can't wait for more because I know that they are in progress. So we can't wait to read them in Polish. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest was Dr. Lindsay Gibson. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you and see you later.